next up, we have a man that Time selected as one of the 25 most influential people in space. He's the former chair of the astronomy department at Harvard University, founding director of Harvard's Black Hole Initiative, and director of the Institute for Theory and Computation at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. He's also the author of over 700 scientific papers and 4 books, including Extraterrestrial, The First Signs of Intelligent Life Beyond Earth. In his own words, my inspiration is drawn from nature, being away from people.
So let me start with a fundamental perspective about our life. We are born into this world without a script. Just like actors put on a stage without a script, there is no explanation. We don't know the meaning of life. The first thing to do is, of course, examine the stage, and that's what astronomers often do. That's my profession as a scientist, trying to figure out the scale of the stage and what it contains. That's the universe at large. And one thing you realize when you examine the universe is that it existed for 13.8 billion years. We live only for one part in 100 million of that play. We don't know much about that play. We live for a very brief moment in time, and therefore that teaches me a sense of modesty. You know, we are trying to figure out the play that we are playing as actors on a stage without a script, but we only witness a tiny bit of that play. And the other thing is, we live on Earth, which is one planet out of 10 to the power 21 planets in the observable volume of the universe, more than the number of grains of sand on all beaches on Earth. So not only that we occupy a tiny bit of the entire stage, you know, and even the biggest emperors that conquered the large pieces of land on Earth, you know, they don't look more impressive than an ant that hugs a single grain of sand on the landscape of a huge beach. So you cannot escape the thought that arrogance makes no sense here on Earth. And moreover, the differences between humans that we often assign great significance to are not meaningful, you know, in the big scheme of things. So when we are trying to feel superior relative to other beings based on superficial features like which nation they're from, what color their skin is, that makes zero sense in the big scheme of things. We should all be modest and humbled by the size of this stage. But to me, an interesting question is, are there other actors on this stage? Perhaps we can ask them what the play is about. Maybe they have a deeper insight because they have been around for longer than we did. And by the way, the sun is a relative latecomer. Most stars formed billions of years before the sun. And about half of them have a planet the size of the Earth, roughly at the same separation. And if you arrange for similar circumstances, you might as well get similar outcomes. So there could have been intelligent civilizations that predated us by billions of years. And maybe they figured out the meaning of life. So let's find them. That seems to be a controversial subject for some mysterious reason that I cannot fully understand. Because to me, it sounds natural that if you are put on a stage without a script, you ask other players what the play is about. So how can we do that? Well, in 2017, we got a wake-up call. The first object from outside the solar system was spotted near Earth. And it looked nothing like we've seen before. Didn't look like a comet or an asteroid. It was given the name Oumuamua because it was discovered by a telescope in Hawaii. And this word, Oumuamua, means a scout in the Hawaiian language. But the more we looked at it, the more strange it appeared. It didn't have a cometary tail, didn't look like a comet. It was most likely flat, pancake-shaped. and it was pushed away from the sun, most likely by reflecting sunlight. And in September 2020, there was another object pushed away from the sun by reflecting sunlight without a cometary tail. Turned out to be a rocket booster that we produced, an artificial object, and we made it. The question is, who made Oumuamua? That was a wake-up call because, at least to me, it illustrated the fact that we should engage in space archaeology. In the past 70 years or so, we looked for radio signals from other civilizations, but that's just like trying to have a phone conversation. You need the counterpart to be alive. We cannot have a phone conversation with the Mayans. The Mayan culture is gone, but we can find relics they left behind in archaeological digs. And so we can do the same thing, examine every object that arrives to the shores of the solar system and look for plastic bottles among the rocks on the beach. And if we find a plastic bottle, something that looks artificial, we can, in principle, land on it and check it out and maybe import the technology if it's much more advanced than what we have developed so far. So there is a lot for us to learn. And science is a learning experience, fundamentally. Unlike what you hear from many scientists that view their profession as a way to promote their image, to get honors, awards, belong to honor societies. That's not really the fun of doing it. The fun of doing it is just like the pleasure of a kid figuring out what the world is about. And you put some skin in the game, you take risks. Kids get bruised very often because of that. But humans have a tendency to think highly of themselves. And for example, the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle argued that we are at the center of the universe. And for 1,000 years, people believed him because it flatters our ego to believe that we are at the center of the universe. Sort of understandable. You know, when I looked at my daughters when they were young, they tended to think that they are the smartest in the world, that they are the center of the world. But when I brought them to the kindergarten, they had a psychological shock. They saw other kids that might be smarter than they are. And so our civilization will mature only when we meet others. And the question is, are we the smartest kid on the block? I doubt it. If you read the newspaper every day, you figure out that humans are not very intelligent. That's why I look for intelligence in the sky. We make a lot of mistakes. We invest most of our resources in fighting each other instead of working together, which makes much more sense. And so the fundamental question is, can we do space archaeology, find evidence for others, and as a result, develop a better future for ourselves? And that means going into space, because Earth will not last forever. In less than 1 billion years, the sun will boil off all the oceans on Earth. So we have to move somewhere else. And the other thing to keep in mind is that it's worth looking at the sky. You know, the dinosaurs enjoyed eating grass, and they had huge bodies. So they thought they are really dominant relative to their environment. And their ego trip was tarnished abruptly when a giant rock the size of Manhattan Island hit the ground 66 million years ago. 3/4 of all forms of life went extinct in that process. We have much smaller bodies, but we have the human brain, so we can design telescopes that will warn us about incoming dangers like a giant rock, and we can deflect it. And we should be wary of the threat from out there in space. If you enter a room full of strangers, you better listen first before speaking out, because you never know if there is a predator in the room. So my book, Extraterrestrial, talks about Oumuamua, this first object that we discovered, and the new frontier that it opens up for space archaeology and what it means for our civilization if we open our eyes and not argue that it's always rocks, it's never aliens, because that would be equivalent to a caveman being introduced to a cell phone and because of his experience of playing with rocks all of his life, arguing that the cell phone is a shiny rock. Thank you.